Imagine finally seeing your bank account reach 6 figures. The number itself feels monumental, almost magical, as if you've unlocked a new level of life. But the moment is subtle, almost imperceptible. Yet, it quietly shifts the way you perceive money, risk, and opportunity. That first $100,000 doesn't just represent financial accumulation. It represents a psychological threshold where decisions, anxieties, and priorities begin to change in ways that few people notice consciously. Most of the patterns at this level are not about spending lavishly or flaunting wealth. Instead, they are about behavioral shifts, how you value money, how you evaluate risk, and how your mental model of security transforms. Financial psychology tells us that humans don't respond linearly to money. We respond emotionally and symbolically, and crossing this threshold triggers subtle yet systemic changes in perception. At $10,000, money often feels like freedom itself. It's immediate, tangible, and you notice every transaction. By $100,000, the perception changes. Small expenses feel trivial, while larger commitments suddenly carry a new psychological weight. Your brain begins to categorize decisions differently, grouping them into long-term consequences rather than short-term satisfaction. It is not the number itself that is transformative, but the psychological context it creates. Researchers in behavioral economics have shown that thresholds like $100,000 or $1 million act as cognitive anchors. These anchors affect judgment, sometimes producing overconfidence, sometimes fostering caution, and often reshaping personal identity. The math behind this shift is equally revealing. Consider the power of compounding. A consistent investment strategy yielding 7% annually grows differently in the mind of someone with $10,000 versus someone with $100,000. The former sees incremental progress, almost imperceptible, while the latter begins to internalize potential exponential growth. The numbers are identical in formula, but the psychological interpretation changes, influencing decisions like asset allocation, risk tolerance, and even the types of investment vehicles considered. These shifts are subtle, yet systemically reinforced by the market environment, by peer comparisons, and by media representations of wealth thresholds. Financial systems themselves are designed to interact with these psychological thresholds. Fees, minimum investment amounts, interest rates, and tax brackets all begin to have a different cognitive impact as wealth grows. When an account balance is under $10,000, the same fee may feel punitive. At $100,000, it feels manageable, almost neutral. Likewise, borrowing and leverage take on a new dimension. The higher the threshold, the more abstract the consequences of risk appear, and the more strategic the decision-making becomes. It is not merely a numerical effect, but a systemic one. Understanding this interplay between human psychology and financial mechanics helps clarify why some behaviors shift automatically once certain milestones are reached. Historical parallels reinforce these ideas. In early industrial societies, achieving a comparable wealth threshold, adjusted for inflation, marked the transition from subsistence thinking to strategic economic behavior. Households crossing this boundary began engaging in investment practices, diversification, and long-term planning. Their behavior was informed not only by the number itself, but by societal structures, legal frameworks, and psychological recognition of security. The psychological explanation is rooted in identity. Crossing $100,000 triggers a reassessment of self-concept. You start to see yourself as someone capable of strategic decisions, someone with leverage over time, rather than merely a participant in daily transactions. This identity shift can produce both clarity and bias. Clarity in the ability to plan for the future, bias in overestimating one's understanding or control over complex financial systems. Awareness of these cognitive tendencies is essential to making rational decisions.
Recognizing the influence of this threshold allows for intentional adjustments to avoid common pitfalls like overconfidence, lifestyle inflation, or misjudged risk. Mathematical models further illuminate these dynamics. Simulations of compounding wealth demonstrate that early thresholds disproportionately affect the perceived trajectory of long-term growth. A $100,000 starting point amplifies perceived momentum, influencing behavioral decisions in savings rates, asset diversification, and retirement planning. Behavioral finance studies illustrate that individuals at this threshold begin incorporating probability, expected returns, and volatility considerations in a more analytical way, while emotional responses still persist subtly, guiding impulsive or conservative tendencies. Zooming out systemically, these shifts are not isolated to individual behavior. Economies rely on aggregated decisions made by individuals crossing these psychological thresholds. Patterns in investment flows, consumption behavior, and risk-taking often mirror the collective impact of these thresholds, influencing market dynamics and even policy responses. Wealth thresholds create emergent phenomena, where the accumulation of similar behavior changes among many individuals produces macro-level trends, cyclical effects, and structural outcomes that can be studied historically and mathematically. Understanding these patterns allows for deeper insight into how human psychology and financial systems co-evolve. The identity shift is profound yet subtle. At $100,000, decisions are no longer purely transactional. They become symbolic, representing freedom, security, or potential. This psychological reframing affects everyday choices, how you evaluate spending, investment, career moves, and personal goals. Awareness of these patterns allows for conscious calibration of behavior. Instead of reacting unconsciously to a number, understanding the systemic and psychological context enables strategic, informed, and intentional financial actions that align with long-term objectives rather than short-term impulses. In the end, the first $100,000 is less about the amount and more about what it represents, a cognitive threshold that subtly reshapes perception, decision-making, and identity. The interplay between human psychology, mathematical compounding, and systemic financial mechanics illustrates how even a seemingly simple milestone carries layered effects across behavior and cognition. Recognizing these patterns fosters clarity, intentionality, and insight into both personal financial strategy and broader economic dynamics. While the number itself is arbitrary, the behavioral implications are real, measurable, and historically consistent. By observing, understanding, and calibrating responses to these thresholds, one can navigate wealth accumulation with mindfulness, analytical rigor, and a calm appreciation for the mechanics of money and the psychology it triggers.
The first $100,000 may seem like just a number, but its real effect is cognitive, shaping how you think, decide, and act financially. Understanding this milestone allows for intentional, informed choices that respect both the mathematics of money and the psychology that governs human behavior.